We're at Baylor University at the office of Robert J. Marks, who is making a nice popcorn treat for him and me. Howdy, Bob.
Hi. I have lots of bowls.
All right.
I'm gonna have some.
Great, thank you. This is a lovely office you got here. You got the...
This is not the best for background noise.
That's okay. We will conduct the rest of the interview after it's done popping, but he's star of the movie Expelled, and got some great mementos of his distinguished career here. So anyway, soon we will start the big interview. I'm Don Wunsch with Missouri University of Science and Technology, and we're here at Baylor University in Waco, Texas on Monday, March 26th, 2012 for the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society History Committee, interviewing the founder of the society, of the Computational Intelligence Society in its original instantiation as the Neural Network Council, Robert Marks.
Greetings.
Bob, would you please tell us your title and position here at Baylor?
Well, I'm a distinguished professor of electrical and computer engineering at Baylor University. Been here since 2003. Prior to that, I was with the University of Washington in Seattle for 26 years. Long time. I've never done anything that long, I'm afraid. Except be married, I suppose.
Good. Well, let's wish you another 26 years here.
Good.
Please tell us a little bit about your formal education and training.
Well, let's see. I got my bachelor's and master's at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology in, 72, 73, PhD in Texas Tech University, 1977. I worked a while for the Navy, but that wasn't too fun. There's lots of fun jobs for the ONR, but I didn't have one of them. And so I left there, Crane Naval Weapons Depot, and I moved to Texas Tech to get my PhD, which I got in 77.
Great. And what was your first computational intelligence related publication?
Well, that's a difficult question because computational intelligence, as you know, is a fuzzy area. And we actually did work in matched filters prior to some of the things coming out, and Hopfield neural networks, which were early manifestation of neural networks, which has since gone by the wayside, could be viewed in a matched filter sort of scenario. But the first real neural network publication we did was presented at the first ICNN, the 1987 IEEE ICNN, which was held in San Diego, California.
Great. Yeah, I remember that conference for a while. That was a great one.
A lot of people do. It really kicked off the modern age of computational intelligence, I believe.
So what motivated you to study engineering?
This is a story I actually share with a lot of students. They come in and they say, what should I do in planning for my future? Well, at Rose-Hulman, what we did is the night before, we were to decide what our major was. The first 2 years of curriculum was exactly the same for everybody. The night before I thought, I really like math, maybe I should go into math. I thought, I like chemistry because I like mixing things together. And I thought, electrical engineering, boy, it sure would be nice to be able to fix TVs and stereos. So I actually, based on that reason, chose electrical engineering, and I still don't know how to fix TVs and stereos. So it's very interesting how these small career choices will actually send you down a road that you certainly didn't expect. So I tell people, do what you like. I tell my students, do what you like. Pick something that's a lot of fun, and as long as you have fun and you make a living at it, Godspeed.
And don't be surprised if it turns out to have nothing to do with the reason you picked it.
Exactly. So that's the reason I'm in engineering.
Well, is there any person or event that influenced your early career choices?
Well, I think that, yes, there actually was a number of them. My Uncle Ray was a POW in World War II who actually motivated me in some of the spiritual dimensions of my college career and actually led me to become a Christian. And then there was John Walkup, who was my PhD advisor, who had an incredible influence on me. In fact, I have a list of 10 men that have influenced my life the most. And prior to the PhD, it was my Uncle Ray and John Walkup who actually were the motivations. John Walkup especially, because he showed me what it was like to be a professor, what it was like to be a Christian who was a professor, and he was just a wonderful role model. And I know you know John because you worked with him for a while, and he's just a
my
wonderful
academic grandfather.
He is your academic grandfather.
PhD
That's
advisor,
right.
yeah.
That's right.
Were any of the other 10 in computational intelligence?
Were any of the 10 in? No, they weren't. Those were the ones primarily that motivated me. So.
Great. Well, so when did you first get involved in computational intelligence related technology?
It was actually, I remember it was 1986. John Hopfield was going around evangelizing the world with his neural networks. He was a great spokesman for getting out the word that this was the future of computation. As I mentioned before, Hopfield's networks have kind of gone by the wayside. But of course, Rumelhart was in that same era with his the backpropagation and the PDP books, and so that was the motivation. I thought, wow, this is really, really cool. The other thing, I was in optics, and early neural networks we thought might be able to be done with optics because electrons can't go through electrons, but photons can go through photons, so you can have really highly interconnected systems using photonics as opposed to electronics. The field has not evolved that way, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my initial motivation as well. What was your first computational intelligence related activity?
Well, it was actually the work that we did at the 1987 ICNN, International Conference on Neural Networks. And I tell you, it's been so long ago I forget the name of the paper. But I think it was pretty good, if I remember right.
It seems to me that it was too.
Okay.
Well, what attracted you into the computational intelligence field? I guess that kind of overlaps a bit with what we've been talking about.
Well, the entire idea that we see in nature all sorts of design, and we have the ability to know that these things indeed work. We learn from nature all the time. And it was just so compelling to think about the brain, the fact that we have evidence that neural networks works. We have evidence right here between our ears, and knowing that indeed that was there and how we could tap in it and how we could learn from it. And I think that currently the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society has a motto of something like learning from nature. So it's actually looking at nature, some of the great things we see there, and learning how to take advantage of what we see and what God has put in nature.
But what makes your short list of contributions that give you the greatest satisfaction?
Well, you know, I think that everybody, when they do work in anything, the thing that really grabs them the most excitedly is their current work. And I think that is indeed the case with me. I'm working now with William Dembski, who is, besides yourself, probably one of the most brilliant men that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And we're looking at the informatics aspects of evolutionary computing, especially not only in engineering, but some of the models which have been looked at in the biological arena. And have basically shown, using no free lunch theorems, conservation of information, that the computational intelligence actually doesn't create information, that there is actually a resident information source which exists inside of every evolutionary program, be it the biological simulations or engineering simulations, that needs to be queried, that needs to be asked, and evolution is one way to mine this information source. There's certainly a number of other ways to mine the information source other than the evolutionary computation. And I'm excited about some of our work, which I think will be around for quite some time.
Well, that's a nice segue into my next question is, where do you think the field of computational intelligence is heading?
Well, you know, that's a good question. I've heard it said that one should never forecast technology, that if we were forecasting technology at the end of World War II, as electrical engineers, we would say, you know, we need vacuum tubes, which have better vacuums, which need better filaments. And of course, nobody saw semiconductors coming down the road. I think we're at a similar sort of situation in forecasting the future and anytime soon. I do believe that there is an incredible amount of hype, which is actually beginning to recirculate. I'm beginning to see it in some of the IEEE Spectrum articles and some of the lay scientific sort of publications where there's this hype that we have a new chip out that emulates the neuron, and pretty soon we're going to have neural networks that have become self-aware, like in Terminator. And I think a lot of these people are, of course, doing the hype in order to promote themselves, in order to get funding, but I think it hurts the field. And these are exactly the same headlines that we saw at the beginning of neural networks. They're just recycling each other. And these people are actually not talking about some of the pioneering work in the area, like Penrose imposition of Gödel's theorem, showing that man is not a computer, and it's going to keep on recycling unless, as who was it, Santayana, said that history repeats itself, and we're having the history repeat itself. So I think that we need to be very wary about that. So I think some of the hype is not good for the field. I think the future will be what it is, and I think that forecasting the future is very dangerous.
What do you think the impact of the computational intelligence field, of the IEEE CIS, of the International Neural Network Society, of the field as professional organizations has made on you personally?
Oh my goodness, I think that certainly in these areas that the IEEE and the INNS in the area of neural networks are certainly the definitive societies for promoting this sort of agenda, and IEEE specifically in fuzzy systems, swarm intelligence, evolutionary computing, and there wouldn't be the community if it weren't for them.
And what do you feel has been your major impact on this community? I know for our viewers, I should point out that Bob was the instigator of the IEEE Neural Network Council, which was the precursor to the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society. And in fact, I remember coming into your office one day as a student, and you were telling me, Don, there needs to be an IEEE organization that takes ownership of this important field there, and that we need to start a council which will eventually grow to a society. And so that was your vision. So clearly I'm answering the question you're supposed to answer, but can you expand on your impact to this community and this society?
There's two ways of course, of which you contribute. One is kind of administratively, the other one is through the research. I was involved very heavily in the early administration of the Neural Networks Council, and we did all sorts of things. The only reason we did all of these things is because they needed to be done, and they were kind of obvious to do. I worked with Herb Rausch, for example, on the proposal for the IEEE transactions on neural networks. Herb went on to be the first editor. Then there was Mike Roth. He was editor for a year. Then I took on the editor-in-chief for, I believe it was 6 years. 6 years for you, I don't know. It's been a long time ago. So that was one of the things we did. We certainly took neural networks transnational. The community was much different then than it is today. Then it was very centric in the United States. And we were one of the first to take, for example, neural networks to China, right, when they began opening their doors. We had neural networks meetings in Russia, in Rostov-on-Don, which you were at, and you were also at the Beijing conference. We took them to Singapore, Japan, China, and also Australia. So we really went transnational in terms of where the neural network meetings were being held, and in that sense helped to hopefully galvanize the international community. We started the IEEE Fellows in Neural Networks. Brad Dickinson at Princeton was the first chair. And by the way, I was involved in some of these from the ideas, but really the great ability, I think, of administration is to find people who are eager to do these things and take charge of them. Brad did that with the IEEE Fellows. Walter Karplus started the IEEE standards work for the Neural Network Council. We started RIGS chapters. It turns out a council cannot have chapters, but a council, we decided, well, we're going to have regional interest groups, which we called an acronym RIGS. I remember in Japan, just the idea was with Toshio Fukuda and Russ Eberhardt, where we thought we need to expand this with fuzzy logic. Who are we going to get to do it? Toshio at that time was involved in fuzzy logic, but there was the identification of Jim Bezdek as the person who did it. Jim Bezdek was contacted and totally took ownership and totally brought in all of the fuzzy community into the council. I think greatly increasing the diversity in what we were doing. Publications, at the time there was a great thirst for neural networks. Mohammed El-Shikari took hold of the publications. We had some of the early videos were the best-selling in IEEE history of the Neural Networks Pioneer series and some of the different tutorials. And we also had a sequence of books that were published. One of the big ones too, I think, was the initiation of WICI, the World Congress on Computational Intelligence. First held, I believe, in '94 in Orlando. And it was there that the word computational intelligence was actually born. We had gone with the idea of the IEEE conference on World Congress on Intelligent Systems, but Jim Bezdek came up with the idea of computational intelligence, and that was coined as recently as 1993. And right now, if you Google computational intelligence, you'll see thousands and thousands of hits, and all of that is due to Jim's work. And then there were other meetings that we started, but those are some of the highlights. And again, I was in a position of leadership at the time, but it really was the identification of people that could do incredible things and take ownership of that. And I think the Computational Society has been very fortunate in attracting these people who went on later to leadership in the Council and the Neural Network Society and the Computational Intelligence Society and began to do their own great works.
Well, speaking of great works, what do you think the influence of the Computational Intelligence Society and societies and field has had on science and engineering?
Well, I think in the area of neural networks, we've had two incredible successes, maybe three. One would be in the area of power engineering. I think that every power company in the world now uses a neural network or some sort of neural network in forecasting power. Neural networks are ubiquitous in the power community. Of course, Heck Nielsen's work in finance and credit reports, and I believe probably every investment house in the world has a secret computational intelligence group that's working away trying to find out different ways to take advantage of the free market in order to suck some more money out of it. And of course, they have to keep their work secret. So I think in those areas, we've made a significant contribution. In machine intelligence, the work, for example, in clustering, some of the work that you're doing, and the ability to take this enormous amount of information that we see today and organize it in some fashion and extract and suck information out of it, I think is also something that is that our societies have contributed greatly to, in terms of the publications, in terms of the meetings where we can have the cross-fertilization of ideas.
That's great. I couldn't agree with you more. Well, we talked a little bit about where you see the future of the field, but how about any new entries of computational intelligence technology?
I personally am involved in swarm intelligence, and I really enjoy how dumb bugs do smart things. And there, of course, is the pioneering work of Russell Eberhardt in particle swarm, the ant colony optimization, but I'm actually talking about social insects and how they're able to accomplish great things like building wasps' nests or building an anthill, only by a number of individual agents doing very simple things. I also think that swarm intelligence is eventually going to have an application in the modeling of things such as organs. I think, for example, our body organs. We have a lung cell, and here this lung cell doing its own thing, not being really aware of anything except its local surroundings, yet collectively they do an incredible thing. So swarm intelligence is even applicable when the swarm doesn't move. So I think that there's going to be some very interesting things done there. I'm interested in, right now, inversion of swarms. That is working with Ben Thompson at Penn State, where the idea is you want a certain emergent behavior. How do you adapt the simple rules the swarms follow in order to achieve that emergent behavior? And that's some pretty exciting work. We're getting some remarkable, surprising results.
Great. Where do you think the big breakthroughs are going to come in the relatively near term, in the next decade or so?
I don't know. I think one can appeal to Moore's law. That's going to help a little bit, but I always point out to people that if you could do an exhaustive search for 1 million bits in a year, if you double the speed of the computer, then you can do in the same year as an exhaustive search for 1,000,001 bits. So doubling the speed of something only increases the search capabilities incrementally. So I don't think that Moore's law is going to help. I'm not sure quantum computing is going to help if we have a breakthrough there. In terms of search time, it only increases the search time by a square root, which can be a lot. But I think that even moderate size searches can actually exceed that.
Okay. Well, do you have any final comments?
I have just been, first of all, I've enjoyed IEEE immensely. The friends and things that I've been able to do, the research that I've been able to report, and of course the performance in some of these areas in terms of service that I've been able to do. It's really good. It's a really good feeling. I think the book of Ecclesiastes, where Solomon talks about the great feeling that people have of all of the day-to-day activities under the sun, that means on the earth, that the great feeling that they have only comes from the feeling of doing a good day's work. And so that's the satisfaction that I have from the past. And hopefully some of the good things are still going to be in the future. We'll see.
I think you're right.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much,
Okay,
Bob.
Bob.